before that, I felt like all I could do was walk. But then once I hired the new team, now I feel like we can run. And maybe that's cliche and whatever, but that's literally how I feel. Like,
you're asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Smart people would know how to use all these different tools. They
start with something small.
And never get your entire organization. If you don't pull off operations, don't give up.
It can be as small as that.
I think you guys are going to have our last today.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Delegate That podcast, where we discuss the art and science of delegation, business management, and leadership. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Brad freaking Cornell, as he told me I need to enunciate. So not just Brad Cornell, Brad freaking Cornell. So Brad, super excited to have you on the podcast. Looking forward to chatting about the things you have going on. But with that introduction, could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your businesses?
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. Pleasure to be on here. Excited to have the conversation. Yeah, a little bit about me. I live in Minnesota, in the metro here, and have two little girls and a wife that I've been married to for 10 years. And we are in the entrepreneurial business family structure. So we, own our own companies and live that lifestyle. But our primary business right now is a parking lot maintenance and street sweeping company in Lewiston, Idaho. So not in Minnesota, in Idaho. I live in Minnesota. So we'll get into the delegation of that. But on the side, we also do real estate investing as well, and have been working on building a portfolio for the last 7 or 8 years as well. So those are our two primary things that we work on a daily basis when we're not playing with the kids.
Do you feel overwhelmed with mundane tasks that eat up your valuable time? It's time to reclaim your schedule and focus on what truly matters. Get your time back with elite remote talent without the time zone hassle. Delegate $10 an hour tasks to focus on more $1,000 an hour tasks. Schedule your free strategy call at 𝗺𝗷𝘁𝗀𝗃.io.
Yeah, very good. I would imagine delegation is extremely important when your business is nowhere near you, because Idaho geography has never been my strong suit. However, Idaho, Minnesota, not next door neighbors. How did you pick a business in Idaho while living in Minnesota, and how did you kind of manage the purchase of that?
Yeah, it's a valid question. We owned a company prior to that we worked in for 7 or 8 years that we ended up selling, and it kind of burned us out. We were, going through the paces of learning business and learning how to grow and scale and do marketing and all the things. So we exited that business, took a little break, and then shortly thereafter getting, as entrepreneurs do, got relatively bored hanging around the house. And, through the sale process, really that opened my eyes to the acquisition process. Didn't realize that was a whole world in and of itself. So through that process, we started talking to brokers. Read is it Buy Then Build?
Buy Then Build, great book.
And into all the podcasts and all the stuff. Got plugged into the information network on the acquisition side of things, and after that, started doing the classic biz, buy, sell, searching addiction that everybody goes through on the acquisition side. You get on there for hours at a time and look at a bazillion businesses. But the idea was to buy something in Minnesota for sure, because full transparency, I was horrible at delegation and team building prior to all of this. So I was like, well, yeah, if it's in Minnesota, I can control it and have my fingers in it and be involved in the day-to-day and be with the team. But this broker reached out to me after I requested information on this random street sweeping company in Idaho. And like a lot of people new to the space do on Biz Buy Sell, you just, reach out for information on everything that looks shiny and pretty and fun to look at. So it's like, sweeping. Never heard of sweeping in my life. Didn't know it existed. Didn't know you could, run that as a private company. I guess if I thought about it, I would have thought it was all the city owning their own equipment and all that whole thing. And long story short, I reached out on info and was like, oh, this is really interesting, just because I wanted to look at it. And, as brokers do, he kept following up with me and following up. And long story short, he convinced me to do an owner meeting, and had the owner meeting. that was a good meeting. And then we had a second owner meeting, and that was another good meeting. And all the information and numbers started to look really good. And then we had another, and it rolled into, wow, I think we can maybe actually do this because of the simplicity of the business model and some of the core skills that I developed over the years. It seemed like kind of a cockamamie idea, but my wife has always been on board with, crazy business ideas. So she's like, feels right to me. We prayed about it, felt right. And so we just kind of went for it. It was kind of a natural progression of feeling more and more comfortable with it the more we looked at it. And lo and behold, we ended up closing on that like 2.5 years ago. It was November of 2022. We closed on that. So it was quite the journey to get there. And I spent the first 2.5 months of ownership physically in Idaho, performing the transition and all the administrative transition as well. That took a lot of time. And that was a really rough season, really, really rough season, being away from my 2-year-old and my wife for 2.5 months and in a brand new environment, and learned a lot. Grew a lot through that process. So, the rest is history now, and all the stuff that I've learned, I'm sure we'll get into that, but that's kind of that's the background. That's the lead up to that story.
Okay. I actually want to start with the first business because you said a few things in there that are lending my ideas to the fact that you had to recreate yourself a little bit. So tell me about what that first business was. It sounds like maybe there was an implication that you may have built that business as opposed to buying it. Is that right? Yeah,
absolutely. It's a company called Signature Woods. It still exists today. It's a reclaimed lumber products company. So when I went to school for engineering and ended up getting bored halfway through college, and buddy and I really like doing woodworking stuff. And so I don't even know. To this day, we still can't remember why we picked this, but we're like, we want to do some woodworking projects over winter break. Let's find some barn wood to work with, like to build some stuff out of. Found a barn that some dude wanted us to take down. We took down this barn, had all this extra wood. I started selling my wood because I didn't know what to do with all of it. And through that, stumbled into discovering that there's this whole market for this type of lumber in that season. This was like the Chip and Joanna Gaines era of fixer-upper. And so it was really hot, took advantage of that. We were a material supplier kind of on a very small scale to like local builders and retail buyers that were trying to build stuff out of it. It evolved into like a finished products company where we were building doors and fireplace mantles and wall paneling products. But all that sounds cool and pretty and fun. But when you zoom out, it was really just me and my wife. There was no employees. There was some good systems, but the systems didn't scale beyond myself. And so I was the single limiting factor in the company. And so we ran it that way. We iterated on products. We had really good manufacturing processes and sales process. Like by the end, we built really good systems, but we didn't know how to scale the business, and we didn't know how to delegate, frankly. We didn't know how to, train team members. We didn't know how to scale the sales and marketing to where we needed new team members. So it really stayed with just her and I. And you only do that for a certain number of years before you burn yourself out. So we were kind of burned out, getting ready to think about selling. And then COVID happened. And then we had our first baby. And then like 3 months later, we sold the company. So like all that kind of happened in the first 6 months of 2020. Where we're like selling it, listing it with a broker. COVID happens, have a baby, sell it while we have a newborn. That was a crazy season of life. But what that business taught us was a lot of the foundational building blocks of business, right? Like what does it look like to manage a P&L and manage expenses and accounts receivable, and what does, soft level marketing look like? What does the sales process look like? Because we didn't go to school for any of that. We didn't have parents that, were business owners in any capacity. So we kind of had to cut our teeth on a lot of that. And frankly, we really didn't have a network. We didn't understand how to build a network, or we didn't know a lot of other people that were business owners or, experts in any of those areas. So we kind of felt like we were just learning it from scratch. That said, we did have those people around us, but we weren't, we've come a long ways in just our understanding of like, the importance of networking and talking to the people around you in your sphere and leveraging that knowledge. I think that would have gone a long way for us. But all that to say, burned us out. And we said after that, we're never doing that again. Like, I'm never going to do something that's only me and solely dependent on me. Cause the reality, and this has been said 1,000 times, we owned a job. We didn't own a company, right? Because we were the company. So if we take a vacation, revenue stops, production stops. So, and that's frankly kind of how I lived my whole life. That's how I did my real estate on the front end. It was all Brad oriented. Some of that is, immaturity, but some of that's also personality as well. I'm a classic Enneagram 1. So like, I like the detail. I like the control. I don't like to trust other people to do things by nature, by default. That's not how I am. So that translated to that business. I think that was one of the primary reasons it never grew, because I couldn't trust anybody to do it as good as I could do it. And I think a lot of us struggle with that in different areas.
Especially when you built it and it's your baby. It's hard
absolutely.
to.
There's a right, an Enneagram 1 thinks there's a right way and a wrong way. It's like black and white. And that's how my brain had been for my whole life. My way is always the best way, not because I'm cooler than anybody, but it's just this is the right way. It's just the right. So, that served me in some ways, but also limited my growth in a lot of ways as well. Again, translated to the real estate side as well. When you have to control and manage everything, you're forced to stay small. You can do things with excellence, but you can only do it at a small scale. And that's what our real estate portfolio looked like too for the first 3-4 years, is just me doing the renovations, me doing all the repairs, me doing all the management, the leasing. And that also burns one out.
Yeah. You only have so many hours in the week, right? And the only way to amplify those hours is to hire a team to be able to do all of that.
Or work 90 hours a week. So
yeah, or work 90 hours a week and never have a family, right? Or never see your family, that is, because you already had a family, but you may not have ever seen them, right? So you built this business, realized that you were exhausted from it. And then as you went into your business buying thought process, you wanted to look for another business that you could manage and direct yourself inside of Minnesota. So you said that you kind of learned a bunch from that, but then you seem to be almost wanting to go right back into that only with buying a business. So how did that thought process go through your head and with your wife trying to plan out buying this business? Okay, what do we learn from the previous thing, and how are we going to apply that to this new business that I still want to control?
I feel like, personal development comes in iterations, right? And this is like a intermediary iteration of myself. The first version of myself was that very controlling, want to manage everything. The current version of myself is how much can I delegate and not do myself so I can spend more time with my kids? But somewhere there was some gray area in that transition where, after we sold the first company, I did some consulting for a property management company that I knew the owners of really well. And there was some relationship there. And he knew I was really good at operations. So he kind of courted me and pulled me into his organization. And so that was part of that gray area season where he kind of let me run his team. And that was the first time I'd ever had exposure to teams. And that was an eye-opening experience for me to really understand everybody has their key role and is a specialist in what they're doing. And I came in not as a worker bee, but as an operational consultant. So through that experience, I was kind of forced to stay at a high level, and everybody's doing their thing, whether I'm there or not. But my job was to look at the systems and look at the team and optimize all of that. So that was an eye-opening moment for me. I'm like, wow, okay, the team just is already doing everything. It's not dependent on me. Now I'm here just to optimize what's already there. And that was really mind blowing. I still to this day, I don't know why he gave me that opportunity, but very grateful for it. And that was kind of a floating work environment for me on the way to buying this company. So that experience, combined with not ever wanting to pigeonhole myself again, like I did in the first company, combined with listening to all these podcasts talking about delegation and personal development and building teams and buy then build, reading that book, my brain is starting to get exposed to, if you want to go bigger and further, you have to go beyond yourself. Like you're your own limiting factor, right? So the combination of all that led me up to, I think, being comfortable with the idea of buying something out of state. It certainly wasn't ideal, but excuse me, sometimes you have to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, right? I didn't have any other hot opportunities in Minnesota. We'd looked at a couple different things, some with partners, some by ourselves. None of that was panning out. This was an opportunity that was in front of us. And we thought, combination of our experiences and where we wanted to grow into, it made sense to us at that time. And then really after we bought it, that's when Bradley 2.0 really was born. And a lot of those, whether you want to call them unhealthy tendencies or just core personality tendencies, really got beat out of me in ways. And then since then, I think I've become more refined and I've learned how to leverage those core personality traits, but also grow into other versions of myself, other parts of myself that I didn't really realize I didn't even know I could do. When you buy an out-of-state company, that automatically puts you into the delegation seat. But buying a small out-of-state company makes you get really good at it really, really fast. And frankly, I think that's what I needed. I without that kind of, we talk about that a lot in our conversation, my wife and my conversations. Like if we wouldn't have had this valley sweeping experience and the out-of-state experience, I'm not sure I ever would have gotten over that hump and gotten over some of those tendencies. So it kind of like I said, it kind of beat it out of me and forced me to grow those muscles that I've really never used before. So really, really grateful for that.
So that's how you turned into Brad freaking Cornell instead of just Brad Cornell.
Let's go, baby.
Very good. So let's jump into then the valley sweeping, because it sounds like that's where we're going to get a lot of this, the leadership and delegation side of the house, right? So you had some learning moments, which I think hopefully everybody has as they're going through their entrepreneurial journey. Like if you're not learning, then you're dying, right? So you had some learning moments in your own business, and then in being the consultant, which, by the way, I love the consultant work. I love being a consultant. It's fun for me to go into a business and not have to be the guy doing the work, but man, oh man, helping them with systems and building all that. So good on you for using that as a great tool to bring into now valley sweeping. So let's talk a little bit about valley sweeping and like what does the team size look like? What did it look like when you came into it, and what have you kind of done since owning it the last 2.5 years?
Oh, geez, that's a whole podcast in itself.
Well, it just so happens you're on one, so let's keep talking.
So when we bought it, there was 3 full-time employees, and really it was more like 2.5 full-time employees. And then on top of that, there was the owner who told me he was working 40 hours a week, but really is more like 80. So that's always a fun one when you're buying a business. This would be my quick tip for anybody buying a business. If you're buying a business, whatever the owner says he's working, double it by default for a variety of reasons, but you'll thank me later. So, and then his wife was very part-time doing like accounts receivable. So kind of a small team. It was sub 1 million in revenue. But the magic in it is that about 85% of the revenue was reoccurring. So very, very highly reoccurring revenue. Not all sweeping companies are that way, but this one was. So we do a lot of like retail parking lots. So think like Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, and then everything smaller and bigger than those as well. Industrial, law offices, restaurants, like anything you can think of that has a parking lot, we'll maintain that. So a really small team. The owner did a lot of the technical stuff. He did all the phone call answering, basically everything except for the really easy, like reoccurring stuff. He had his nighttime team doing that. So super small. So when we came in, I was absorbing the wife's responsibilities and all of his business management responsibilities. And then I had to figure out how to delegate his sweeping responsibilities, because he was doing all of the technical sweeping, and then the nighttime guys were doing all of the routine, easy, basic, like repetitive stuff. So that was hurdle number one, is like, okay, I can absorb the business management stuff. I have enough experience to like figure all that out, the administrative and QuickBooks and all that was normal to me. But how do I outsource his technical sweeping skills? And then additionally found out that he also did all the mechanical repair on the trucks. So right away, I'm immediately within the first couple of months having to figure out, I need to find and train somebody to do technical sweeping. And I need to figure out somebody to fix my trucks when they break. Because naturally, as it goes with a, long time business, the trucks were really old and, duct taped together and all of that fun stuff. So we ended up hiring like an in-house mechanic. That lasted like 4 months and then he quit. We hired some part-time people to kind of train and do the technical work. Some of those kind of came and went, and we spent a lot of time rebuilding building systems in general, like from scratch around what the routine guys do. So as it goes, we pulled in some software. There's some really cool software out there that manages route-based companies like this. So we kind of pulled that in, and I started to, because that's where my brain goes. It's a very critical, I have a very critical mind, and I see systems, I see gaps, I see issues, and I usually can see solutions very, very quick. But the problem on the front end is I was still seeing it through the lens of, I need to fix it. And looking back, the reason I spent 2.5 months there is because I didn't delegate any of the transition. It was all me. Again, if I would have brought in like an admin to help me, I could have done it in 3 weeks instead of 2.5 months of being away from my family. So all this is kind of slapping me in the face as I go. I'm like, okay, all right, that's a lot of work. That's 10 more hours a week. Okay. Like trying to like scrap it all together as we go. And it was brutal, to be honest, both from the sense of being away from my family, but also like exercising, again, muscles that I really have never exercised, never even used in a lot of ways. Like I think the most I'd ever used was maybe like calling a plumber one time for one of my rental properties to do something that I couldn't figure out myself. So that was like the extent of my delegation experience prior. So this really forced that, and over the course of 2.5 months, I got things to a place systems wise and training wise, and I kind of got the existing team on the same page where I could actually leave. So I left for, I think, 1.5 or 2 months. And I kind of got things to the place where I was like, okay, I have to leave to see what breaks. And I'm not going to know what breaks until I'm out of here. And then I left, and like within the first 2 weeks, like nothing, no systems like broke. Like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we're still good. And then things started kind of coming apart. Like, man, having that in-house mechanic, found out he was stealing from me and doing, really crappy work. And then my lead nighttime guy was not actually quality control checking the other guys like he's supposed to. And they're still reverting back to the old way of doing things. And so we had a lot of challenges with that, with me not physically being there. Right. So that kind of went on for, frankly, probably, if I'm really honest, it really went on for like almost 2 years of kind of like, I built some good systems, but I was still basically general managing it. I got it pretty passive by nature because it's so reoccurring. I got it actually pretty passive where I was working less than 10 hours a week on the business. But there was always these looming problems because there was this undercurrent of legacy employee mindset. And because I wasn't there, certain things were just not getting implemented the way that they should have been. It was working well enough for me to be out of sight, out of mind, and to have some financial and time freedom, which was awesome. But in the back of my mind, there was always like, when's the next crisis going to happen? When's the next truck going to blow up and then we have to deal with that? Or, when's the next time I'm going to hear about an employee doing something crazy that nobody told me about for 2 months, and now I'm having to figure it out and deal with it now. And so it was kind of this in between where I was better than the first version of myself. I'd grown a lot to the point where I can leave the state I am now up to the point where, fast forwarding, now I go there twice a year. And so I worked up to that. So I was working up to that, like things were working, we're making money. The business was doing well financially. But there was still some Band-Aids. And that all culminated with a truck burning to the ground in Winco's parking lot 8 months ago. And that that was a culmination of the Band-Aids all bursting kind of at the same time. And, to be real transparent, like me just avoiding certain problems that I didn't want to deal with because I was so far away. And I didn't feel like I had the right team in place, and I didn't know how to make that implementation happen. So it's just easier to kind of look the other way and let the cash flow come in and pacify the team and deal with some of the legacy employee drama and issues that are caused with a lot of times legacy employees. But then when that truck burned down, that was the final straw. And it was like a fork in the road for me where it's like, okay, Bradley, either you're going to optimize this team and build new culture and invest back in this company, or this is just going to be another big Band-Aid that you have to stick on. And I'm really grateful now, fast forwarding 8 months from then, that we chose the prior or the former. We invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into new trucks, new teams. We've literally fired our entire team and hired a brand new team, hired a GM. That was the best thing I ever did. I avoided that for a long time because I didn't want to pay for it, because Bradley wants to do everything himself. It's like, why would I take a $70,000 cut hiring a GM when I can just like kind of do this 10 hours a week remotely and go to Florida in the winter, and like, this is all cool. But there's a stark difference between a team that is surviving and a team that's thriving.
I think that's, if you were to look back and do some of the math and say, okay, well, all of my cash flow now went to a burned vehicle, and then I had to spend an extra $100,000 to replace more vehicles and now hire this GM. Had you just hired the GM to begin with and said, hey, we need to build the right team here, I would imagine, like, what has your revenue done over the last 8 months since doing that as well?
I mean, we're on track to grow 40%.
Okay. So if you're growing 40%, you were at a sub $1 million. Let's say you were at, let's just say $1 million for even numbers. And then all of a sudden you're growing 40% or 1.4 million. Okay, well, you've more than paid for the $70,000 a year or $100,000 a year for this GM. And it's one of those that a lot of people have such a hard time getting over that barrier. So if you were to kind of rewind and say, okay, I just bought this thing. I'm seeing some of the legacy issues. You're seeing some of these problems, but I think I can manage these. How many times did you push that signal away? And what would you recommend folks do as they catch those signals now that you're looking back on it with the pleasure of 2020 hindsight?
No, that's a great question. I think that's a tricky one, and it's case by case for each person. What the situation for me was that I didn't have another stream of income other than our real estate, which was decent, but not quite enough to like be comfortable without any other income. So there's that dependency, right? And when you build that association with like, this is my livelihood, like I'm dependent on this stream of income, it gets hairy, Because you're like, you can know that you want to delegate. You can know that you need to hire a GM. You can know that in order to scale, you have to like bring on more people or pay this vendor more or whatever. But excuse me, when it's associated with your personal lifestyle and livelihood, there's that battle internally. So that's what I struggled with for a long time. Like the business was pumping out multiple six figures of cash flow every year, doing very, very well. And that's great. That's fun. Like I can go reinvest that in real estate. I can inflate my lifestyle a little bit. I can do whatever. But, at some point, the pain and the inconvenience becomes a bigger thing than maybe the money. And that was, combined with several other things, was part of the breaking point. And that truck burning to the ground turned the lights on and was like, okay, screw it. Like we're going for it. We have all this cash stocked up in the bank. We know what to do. We're firing all these bad attitudes. In terms of the GM, that's an interesting one. Like looking back, like would I have hired a GM? For me personally, I think what I went through is exactly what I needed to break myself of those. It's like breaking a wild stallion. Like I feel like that was kind of my experience.
Boy, you're putting yourself up as a wild stallion. I like it. Yeah, that is Brad freaking Cornell right there. Jeez.
But I think I needed that personally. So if somebody needs that breaking to realize the importance of building the muscles and the skills of team building, culture building, delegation, systems building. Like if you don't have those skills, frankly, don't hire a GM. Like go through the pain to build those skills. But then as soon as you build those skills, like hire the right people and just go, baby. Because something I've said over and over and over to different people over the last 8 months has been like, before we fired the team and hired a GM, a new team, and everything's new. It's like a new company, basically. Before that, I felt like all I could do was walk. But then once I hired the new team, now I feel like we can run. And maybe that's cliche and whatever, but that's literally how I feel. Like there was all these ideas and things I wanted to do and growth. But with the old mindset, my old mindset combined with the legacy team and their mindset, like all those exciting ideas just kind of died because it's too much effort from afar to try to get these people with bad attitudes to do the things that I want to do in the visionary seat. And so at some point I just stopped dreaming for the company. Like my vision for the company just kind of like plateaued. And I thought, whatever, it's pumping out a couple $100,000 a year. I'm less than 10 hours a week. Like I'll just make it as passive as I can. And then maybe I'll sell it, and then when things would get bad, I'd be like, I'm selling it. I hate this thing. I want to be done. And then we'd, have really good months. I'd be like, this is freaking sweet. Let's keep this. Or the team would like have a good moment and like, it'd be, oh, this is amazing. But overall, it just was stagnant. But then getting rid of those bad attitudes and bringing in people that didn't have any context of the old way of doing things. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would hear from those legacy team members, this just isn't how Jeff used to do it. Or, we've been doing it this way for 20 years. And anybody who's bought a business, like I'm sure has had those conversations with their employees. But it's amazing when you bring in a GM and then you build really good systems really fast and then bring on new people. That's their baseline. They don't have any old context to pollute the culture and the processes moving forward. And so since doing that, and that was a very heavy lift, very stressful lift to do all of that. But now it almost feels effortless because everybody's on the same wavelength. And 𝗵𝗫ci taught us how to use the predictive index. So we use that in this process too. We're like, every applicant takes the PI assessment now, and we hire based on fit, the right person in the right seat so we can all run in the same direction together. And doing that, establishing the culture that I always wanted, but never felt like I could implement, doing all those things together. Now, I just got back from a trip out there where, like, last week I was out there, and the first time ever I actually had a good time out there because my team actually likes me and I actually like them, and we're doing awesome things and we're growing. We have newer trucks and, like, we're moving in the same direction together, to the point where they threw me like a party with all of our vendors and their wives. Surprise party when I showed up on Wednesday. They had 20 people there with like a big cookout. And I'm like, what is this? Because every other time I go there, it was trauma. This is like headbutting with the old team and, like, things not being the way I want them to, and trucks breaking down and just crap. So it's been a huge evolution, but yeah, everybody's story is a little bit different and journey is different. It depends on what you need. If you already are great at delegation and great at team building and have management experience and all of that, then yeah, you need to pull the trigger on the front end and build that culture as fast as possible, knowing that you're going to have resistance from the legacy team. But if you were like me and didn't have the experience, I don't know. I think you just got to trudge through the mud and build the muscles, and hopefully come out on the other side ready to fire on all cylinders.
So in the military, we had, you'd have like the first 90 days of a new commander coming in, kind of trying to learn the processes, what's going on, kind of like the 2.5 months that you spent sitting in there. And then afterwards they'd come out, usually at some point in that 90 days, they'd come out with their commander's expectations and the culture trying to go forward, that they would set all of their people down and go through all of the stuff. Now, I try to take some of that to the business side of the house, some of my military experience to the business side of the house. So do you think that when you took this thing over, had you done something along those lines, right? Done that for those 2 months, wrote a bunch of stuff down, and then said, hey, Jeff's gone. Brad freaking Cornell's here. This is kind of where I'm going. Do you think there would have been less pushback since it was all set up front? Or do you think just because of the team that was there, it was just kind of the way that it was because they were so set in their ways?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. This is unique to me, being the size that it was and out of state. There was a lot of fear involved because I'm very vulnerable. Like, small company, I'm out of state, or my goal was to be out of state as fast as possible, get back to my family, get back to my life in Minnesota. So yes, I wanted to do that. I'd read enough and listened to enough, talked to enough people. They told me, like, first 90 days, don't do anything. Just, like, learn the business. Don't go change all this stuff. It'll freak people out and blah, blah, blah. So I listened to that advice. And, but to answer your question, I think if I would have kind of laid it out that way and pushed hard, I definitely would have had people quit on me very quickly. And I was super scared of that because I didn't know enough about hiring and team building in that season to confidently replace anybody. Because in my mind at that point still, I was like, these people are experts. Like, these guys have, like, the two of them had like 20 plus years of sweeping. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how do you replace that? Well, lo and behold, now that we have a great training process, like, we can train somebody in 7 days and they're rock stars after that. Like, doesn't take 20 years of but I didn't know that at the time, right? So there was a lot of fear that I would balance, like, how far can I push to make things the way that I know it should be and the way I want things to be without pushing people off the edge. And actually 6 months in, one of the originals actually quit because of that. Even as gentle and relationally aware as I was being, he still couldn't handle it. And we just butted heads, and he's like, I'm out of here. Like, and that was a freaky moment because that was the first time I ever then had to hire. And so, like, then we're exercising that muscle, and, we've come a long way in that too. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to your point, it is going to be situationally dependent. You have to kind of get the lay of the land and understand what can and can't be changed, how things are feeling, who the people are. Those military units, those people are stuck there because the military told them they have to be. These guys, no, they can quit whenever they want to, right? And the way that I have always looked at people quitting or people needing to be fired is if they have to quit or I have to fire them, that just means that they're not a good fit for this spot. No big deal, right? I can find somebody that is a good fit for this spot, which is why you use culture index and all of that to try to get the right people sitting in those seats. So, that is just part of the business process, is people quitting, people needing to get fired. So, borderline to me, I try to look at it, and this sounds cheesy coming from the guy who's the one doing it, but you're borderline promoting the person by firing them, right? Because you're putting them in a position that they are better suited for than the one they're in right now. So let them go thrive there.
Absolutely. And that's become part of my leadership style is I want, whether you're going to be my team member or somebody else's team member, ultimately, I want you to be happy and thriving. And if that's not going to be with our team, I'm super happy for you to leave and find something that's truly going to make you happy. That's going to be best for your family, best for your lifestyle and your relationships. That's ultimately what we're all shooting for in our own personal lives. So if that's not with us, that's cool. If it can be a graceful transition on the way out, that's always appreciated. But if not, ultimately we're looking for people that align to that, right? And that's what makes a good team. I'm very strict with my GM and our office manager that we don't refer to our people as our drivers or our employees, especially employee. We always say team member, because that's just part of the culture that I've always wanted is I'm the owner. Yeah, Cody's the GM. We have X drivers, but nobody's more important or necessarily outranking anybody. We're all vital members of that team and that culture, and everybody needs to be aligned to that all the time. We're not individual employees. You're not just a number. It's a team effort. And without a high functioning integrated team, it's hard to, again, run. And that's our goal, is to run. And if people are just numbers and employees or drivers or technicians or whatever, obviously that's what they are and that's their title. But, the culture behind it is we are a team. And without a high functioning team, we can't go to where we want to go individually in our personal lives, but also as an organization towards the vision that we have for the company.
So very true. I love it. Well, Brad, I have really enjoyed kind of understanding a bit more about what you have going on. I thank you for sharing and being vulnerable throughout this whole process and talking about the difficult decisions that this came through and the struggles that you had. I'm positive that somebody listening is going to get a bunch out of that. So I thank you very much. Now, if folks wanted to reach out to you, learn a little bit more about what you have going on, or follow you on social, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I'm not a huge social media guy. I am on Facebook, but yeah, if they wanna reach out to me, I'm happy to answer emails. Or people can email me. Do you want me to give that, or you put it in the show notes? Yeah, just my first and last name, Brad Cornell 13 at Gmail. Feel free to email me. That's my personal email, and yeah, always happy to have these conversations. When you go through a lot of growing yourself, it's always super rewarding to maybe accelerate that for other people. So always happy to have the conversation with people. For sure. Yeah. Wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes. So let's go ahead and do that. Right. So learn from my 2.5 years of hell.
Yeah. We've all been there. So I hear you. So, well, again, Brad freaking Cornell, thank you so much for jumping on. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for listening. Please, if you're listening to this and you thought that somebody else would get something out of this, please share it with them. Subscribe, comment below. Let us know what your favorite part of the podcast was. And we look forward to seeing everybody on the next show.